where are we on it? Let's talk about a couple more of the omissions. You feel like Yunus Musah not getting called into this one, which we're calling Last Chance Saloon? Do you think he's out? We shouldn't count on Yunus Musah siding for the 2026 World Cup roster at all? Or do you feel like there's still embers of hope in there somewhere if he can find his way into the Atalanta team? I mean, he's just one of a few players that you start to get concerned about because we're running out of windows.
Yeah, he's on the outside. He's right now, this is a big concern because a player like Gio Reyna is in the same situation. He's getting called in and not Yunus. And there's a number of, look at all the players that are missing.
Yeah. So Zawadzki over Musah. Who would have thought? Zawadzki over Musah.
The players who are missing are guarantees. They're not like the players who you're like, oh, they're in the conversation. Or Anthony Robinson is a guarantee. Richards, Christian, McKinney. So McKinney, Pulisic, Weah, and Tillman are all guarantees.
Richards. Yeah.
No, but I'm saying in the positions that Musah
right. I see.
Those are all guarantees. On top of Adams and Tessman are locked. You'd say Luna's locked, even as a substitute. And we're forgetting Johnny Cardoso, who's been injured, who's coming back. Where does Yunus Musah fit in when you're not playing? You're not going to get in.
Yeah, I don't know where he fits in.
I go back to this horrible decision to move to Atalanta. And I think taking a break too this summer, and we all know.
I think that's hurting him more than the Atalanta.
Yeah,
well,
no. The Atalanta one's to take a summer break when you weren't playing, you weren't overused. And I know people need, mental health breaks and need restarts. But to take a mental break, a vacation this summer to call, hey, I want to stay, with my family. When you weren't used, you didn't overrun yourself. That's a killer. That's for me. If I'm a coach, I'm saying you don't want to be here. This isn't a priority. The World Cup is next summer. You don't get to play a World Cup's on home soil. You have the opportunity to do that, and you need a break.
Yeah.
And by the way, your position's not set on this team. You're not in the same boat as Christian. That's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know how he works his way back in other than getting playing time. This is an interesting camp of omissions, players that are getting called in. And in some ways, I know we touched upon Scally a little bit. I'm telling you the details. There's been a big, I don't say big. Yeah, I guess it's big, but there's been a lot more talk, I should say, Chuck, of the culture, right? We've heard it from the players. We've heard it from Pochettino. Like they're watching every single thing. And so I wonder who's going to shine with that type of spotlight on them. Not only, like I said, not only the games. The games are important, but they're a product of how your habits and disciplines, off the field and how they play onto the field.
The spotlight has been on them since Pochettino took over, but now, you're up against the clock.
Yes,
there's
an urgency there now, right?
There's only one more window.
Yeah,
put that in perspective. There's only one more real window to prove that you deserve to be on this roster. So for guys in this camp, the ones we talked about, if they don't show any signs of progress, any signs of them being leaders and impact players within this group, come March, if they don't get called in for the next two friendlies, which by all accounts are going to be massive opponents, then that's lights out for me. That's curtains.
Right. Now, the one thing I guess we haven't touched upon that maybe people thought we would have 35 minutes into the show is the fact that we have Sebastian Berhalter and Gio Reyna on the same roster. Apparently, they used to talk a lot back in the day. I don't know if that still exists, but it could be a little awkward if they haven't talked in a while. What do you say, Chuck? I mean, for me, listen, I had an issue here. Let me say this. I'll give some context. In 2006, I played in the World Cup team with Clint Dempsey. A month later, after the World Cup, he broke my jaw. Okay, he sent me a message afterwards and apologized and all that, and it was great. But when you're sitting there and you're injured for 8 weeks, you just get at this built-up animosity, and you start to think through all the plays and did he do that on purpose? Was it an accident? You just go through that whole process. And so my first game back was against the New England Revolution and Clint Dempsey. So I had said in a radio interview that if I have a chance to let Clint know that I'm back and ready to go, sure, I'll let him know. And that got completely spun out of control and got back to Clint that I was out there to hurt him. And I came on as a sub for 10 minutes left to go. And there was a 50-50 ball and ran through him, and he turned into a fight, wanted to fight me after the whatever, blah, 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 all the high emotion. So the next time I see Clint, I know I'm burying a lot of details here, but the next time I see Clint is at the end of the year MLS Awards. We both made best 11, and it was awkward, intense. Now this is like another level. This is like times 100 between these two. But I went up to Clint right away and I just squashed it. I said, "Hey man, I was emotional and just took responsibility for my actions within that. Obviously, I'm not trying to hurt you or anybody else." And that was it. And since then, me and Clint have been solid. So I wonder and I hope that both of these guys will get right to it and this won't even be an issue. And that's what I expect will happen. But it is interesting that they're both in the camp at the same time, given the history of their families at this point.
Yeah, I would say from them as professionals, you move on.
Yeah.
And whether you're not friends, we've all been a part of teams where you play with guys you don't like or you don't respect because they have done something, they treated people poorly or they did something bad to a teammate, whatever it is. But you're all professionals and you all have to figure out ways to work together. Now that applies across life. You're in jobs, you're around people that you may not particularly like, but you still have to figure out a way to move forward and to work together, even though you may not like somebody. So it's a good point for these two to come in and say, "Hey, we're professionals. We're trying to play in a World Cup. We're also playing in the midfield, so we're competing with each other. Maybe we're playing together. We just have to do what's best for the country, right? For our game and for the team." You move that on. I think the awkward part is if you're talking about the Berhalters sitting there in the stadium and Reyna sitting there stadium. It's the parents. That's where it's really awkward.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
Because you're talking about all the parents sitting in the same section, because that's typically what happens. Then that's where you're like, all right, they sit down there, we sit up here, or we keep our distance. But in terms of guys on the field sharing moments together, you get on with it.
Fresh off the press conference from Mauricio Pochettino. Paul, what were your big takeaways from what the head cheese, the big enchilada, had to say at this press conference?
Yeah, I think the biggest one revolves around the biggest name that's back in the camp, and that's Gio Reyna. And the reality is that Gio is not really playing a lot at his club. But Mauricio Pochettino said, look, this is a special player. This is a player that we have to consider kind of as a special circumstance to bring him in. And I thought it was interesting on multiple levels what he said. He said, we have to bring him in, maybe not even just about how much he's playing or what he does on the field, but to spend time with him, to be around him. It's our last chance to be around these players before the March window. We want to be around him. He was asked whether that's a contradiction against what he has said before, where you have to prove yourself on the field.
It feels like it a little bit. It does.
And I think, the reality is, like, there have been these kind of exceptions for Gio in other instances as well. But we have to acknowledge that this return of Gio Reyna is coming in a camp where there are a lot of players who aren't here. And I think that was the other takeaway for me, is that Mauricio Pochettino continues to try to carve out space and time and care for players who are coming back from injury, who have had changes at the club level with coaches. So for that reason, no Christian Pulisic, who's expected to return from an injury this weekend for Milan, but isn't going to be in the camp. No Weston McKennie, who has a new coach at Juve, and Mauricio Pochettino said he'd like to see him stay there, to continue to build that relationship with the coach, stay on the field for Juventus. No Tim Weah, he's out injured. No Johnny Cardoso, he's only just working back from an injury. No Anthony Robinson, he remains injured. So a lot of players are, no Malik Tillman, also just coming back from injury. So those injuries, I think, opened the door to the possibility of bringing Gio Reyna back in. And let's see how it goes. Sebastian Berhalter also on this roster, which is another interesting wrinkle.
Of course. A nice little wrinkle there. I guess when you think about it from a coaching perspective, you have to be very delicate in your messaging, because if you're giving an opportunity to someone who maybe hasn't earned it and gets thrown into the quote unquote special category, that messaging and how it's received by the rest of the group doesn't always play well. I'm just saying it might work out fine. And I'm sure that it will, because Mauricio Pochettino has built in many successful cultures over his time as manager at multiple destinations. But this one feels a little tricky given the baggage, I would say, that comes with Gio Reyna. There's no denying his talent. Everybody knows it. Calling him a special player is not outside the realm of possibility, right? We know that he's capable of that. But what has he shown? And he's only played, I think, 100 and something minutes since September 21st. And yeah, it's interesting. And I'm kind of curious as to how it gets all balanced and how he fits into it. Big camp for him. Not just him, Paul, but for a lot of these players who, and me and Charlie were talking about it a little bit earlier. Like, wait, you mean me? Like, you want me back in the roster? We have a couple of those guys in the team. We'll see if they can take advantage of this opportunity as well. Okay, so you said something about the injuries. And I know there's been some beef between Oliver Glasser from Crystal Palace and Mauricio Pochettino that seems to be simmering. Not going away anytime soon, but simmering. How do you think that, or what did Mauricio talk about with regard to managing those types of relationships overall, not just with Chris Richards, but for the group in general?
Yeah, I think his first thing was defense of himself, to say there's no one that cares about players and their injuries as much as we do. We never take risks with players. We're very careful with how we use them. You know, he alluded to Christian Pulisic in Denver and making sure that the doctors and Christian and the team were all on the same page before Christian played in that game. And I think, actually, to be fair to Mauricio Pochettino, if you go back and look at his call-ups, there have been multiple occasions in which he's left players off the squad because they're working back from injury. They're not 100%. He thought it would be better for them to rest. This camp is another example of that. And he talked, look, yes, there are too many games right now. There's too much demand on players, but there's also an acknowledgement, there has to be an acknowledgement that the club plays a role in that too. It's not just the national team that has to say, okay, we should give him a break during the international window. There's a give and take here as well. I would note that Chris Richards played every game in the lead up to the last window for Palace, went to the national team, played in those games, and came back and played in the very next game for Crystal Palace. So as concerned as they might have been about his calf, they stuck him right back out on the field when he got back from national team duty. I think it goes both ways. I think Mauricio Pochettino was careful with how he phrased it, but his thing is our most important person that we're worried about with each relationship is the player himself. It's not about what does the coach need, what does the club need, what do we need? It's what are we doing to make sure that we're putting this player in the best possibility to be successful. And, that extends, again, to players who are injured. But I think we've seen also in the past and in this camp as well, it is also about the club standing, right? So Weston McKennie is the example in this camp. Juve has a coaching change. McKennie, it took him a long time to get on the field, as it does every season at Juventus. Okay, what can we do to make sure Weston stays on the field and continues playing? Because as Mauricio Pochettino said, we know what he can do with the national team. We know him very well. We think it's in his best interest to stay at the club. And in the long term, in our best interest for Weston McKennie to keep his starting job and to continue playing at Juve. And I think he's been pretty consistent with that messaging throughout his time with the national team.